Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of the dancing plague of 1518, when an entire town danced themselves to death. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In July 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, a woman named Frau Troffea stepped into the street and began dancing. She danced without stopping for days. She did not choose to dance. She could not stop. Within a week, 34 people had joined her. Within a month, approximately 400 people were dancing compulsively through the streets of Strasbourg, unable to stop, dancing until their feet bled, their hearts gave out, and their bodies failed. Some danced until they died. No music was playing. The city authorities initially hired musicians and constructed a stage, believing the dancing would cure itself if allowed to run its course. It did not. By September 1518, the episode had subsided as suddenly as it had begun. It left behind confirmed deaths and total bewilderment. Contemporary physicians, bishops, and civic officials all recorded the event. Similar episodes had occurred along the Rhine in 1374 and in Erfurt in 1237. None recurred in Strasbourg. No entirely satisfactory explanation for what happened to 400 people in a medieval city across 2 months of a summer that no one who lived through it ever forgot has been established. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The 20th and 21st centuries were supposed to be the age of answers. Science had decoded DNA, split the atom, put humans on the moon, and mapped the genome. By the logic of accelerating discovery, every mystery should be converging toward explanation. And yet the ledger of genuinely unexplained phenomena, events witnessed by credible observers, investigated by serious researchers, and still lacking a satisfying account, has not shrunk. If anything, it has grown. Part of this is a failure of classification. Phenomena that do not fit established categories tend to be dismissed rather than investigated, filed under anecdotal or mass hysteria, and removed from serious consideration. This is not always wrong. Genuine hoaxes and misperceptions account for a large portion of anomalous reports, but the dismissal is sometimes premature, and the cost is real. Cases that might have yielded genuine insight are closed before they are fully examined. Witnesses are discredited. Evidence is lost. The question is never properly asked. The cases that endure, that survive rigorous scrutiny, and still refuse to yield to conventional explanation are a small but significant set. They share certain characteristics: multiple independent witnesses, physical evidence consistent with witness testimony, and a complete absence of any plausible prosaic explanation that accounts for all the data. These are not ghost stories. They are open problems in empirical science, waiting for someone with the right tools and the intellectual courage to take them seriously. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding the dancing plague of 1518, when an entire town danced themselves to death is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Frau Troffea began dancing in a street in Strasbourg in July 1518 and reportedly continued without pause for between 4 and 6 days before others joined her. The episode grew progressively. Within 1 week, approximately 34 people were affected, and within a month, the number reached an estimated 400. Contemporary accounts are drawn from physicians' notes, a bishop's report, and civic records from the city of Strasbourg, providing multiple independent documentary sources for a single episode. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Strasbourg city authorities initially consulted physicians who advised that the dancers required more movement to expel the affliction, a theory consistent with humoral medicine of the period. The city hired musicians and constructed a stage in a guildhall, providing a space for the dancing to continue under supervision. This decision is regarded by medical historians as having potentially worsened and prolonged the episode by legitimizing the compulsive movement and creating a focal point for others to join. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Deaths were confirmed by contemporary physicians who attributed them to heart attacks, strokes, and exhaustion following days of continuous involuntary movement. The physical consequences of sustained rhythmic exertion without rest, dehydration, hypothermia, cardiac stress, are consistent with fatalities occurring over a prolonged episode. The precise number of deaths is not recorded in surviving documents, but multiple contemporary accounts confirm that people died as a direct result of the dancing. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, similar mass dancing episodes are recorded at other times and locations. In 1374, a mass dancing outbreak spread along the Rhine River through multiple towns. In 1237, a group of children in Erfurt reportedly danced compulsively from that city to Arnstadt. The 1374 Rhine episode involved thousands of people across multiple communities. The recurrence of structurally similar episodes in the same geographic and cultural region across nearly 2 centuries suggests a shared underlying mechanism, likely involving shared cultural beliefs about specific supernatural punishments. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the episode ended by September 1518, when the afflicted were taken to a shrine of St. Vitus at Saverne, outside Strasbourg, where they were blessed, and the dancing reportedly subsided. St. Vitus was a widely feared saint in the region, believed to inflict compulsive dancing as divine punishment on those who offended him. The resolution at a St. Vitus shrine is consistent with a psychogenic mechanism in which the religious intervention provided the cultural permission to stop. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Strasbourg in 1518 was experiencing multiple concurrent crises. A severe famine had followed crop failures in the preceding years. A syphilis epidemic was active. Smallpox had recently affected the region, and religious anxiety in the early Reformation period was intense. Medical historian John Waller, in his 2008 study A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, documented these conditions as the social substrate that made Strasbourg's population unusually susceptible to a mass psychogenic episode triggered by specific shared religious beliefs about St. Vitus's curse. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the dancing plague of 1518, when an entire town danced themselves to death. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that John Waller's mass psychogenic illness hypothesis, published in A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, 2008, holds that the 1518 dancing plague was a stress-induced psychogenic episode triggered by the population's genuine fear of St. Vitus's curse in conditions of extreme social and biological stress. Under this framework, individuals susceptible to dissociative states began involuntary movement that was culturally interpreted as divine punishment, causing others in the same belief system to join through psychological contagion. Resolution at a St. Vitus shrine confirms the religious framework was central to both onset and cessation. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the ergot fungus hypothesis holds that claviceps purpurea, a fungus infecting rye grain that causes ergotism, produced convulsive symptoms misidentified as dancing. Ergotism was historically known as St. Anthony's fire and caused muscular spasms in affected populations. The hypothesis has been proposed for multiple mass psychogenic episodes. Its primary objection in the Strasbourg case is mechanistic. Ergot causes vasoconstriction, convulsions, and paralysis, not the rhythmic, locomotor-directed movement described by witnesses as dancing. Ergot victims cannot walk or dance. They cannot move purposefully. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that religious ecstasy and cult behavior has been proposed as an explanation connecting the 1518 episode to organized cult activity around the figure of St. Vitus, whose feast day involved dancing traditions in parts of medieval Germany. Under this hypothesis, the Strasbourg outbreak began as or became entangled with ritual behavior associated with St. Vitus veneration that spread beyond its initial participants. Waller incorporates elements of this explanation into his psychogenic model, treating St. Vitus belief as the specific cultural mechanism that triggered and structured the episode. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the dancing plague of 1518, when an entire town danced themselves to death, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Waller's 2008 analysis documented Strasbourg's 1518 conditions, confirmed crop failure, active syphilis epidemic, widespread famine, and heightened religious anxiety in the early Reformation through municipal and ecclesiastical records. The coexistence of these stress conditions with the onset of the dancing episode is consistent with the mass psychogenic illness model, which identifies extreme social stress as the necessary substrate for population-scale psychogenic events. No comparable dancing plague occurred in Strasbourg during more stable periods. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented modern examples of mass psychogenic illness confirm the mechanism Waller proposed for 1518. The 1962 laughter epidemic in Tanganyika spread through a school population for months. Mass fainting episodes in schools in Jordan, Afghanistan, and elsewhere have been documented and analyzed in medical literature. Conversion disorder, neurological symptoms without organic cause produced under stress, is a recognized modern diagnosis. These contemporary cases share structural features with the 1518 episode: stress conditions, rapid spread through a defined community, and cessation following intervention. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the ergot hypothesis fails mechanically when compared against the symptoms described by 1518 Strasbourg witnesses. Ergotism causes vasoconstriction, burning sensations in the extremities, and ultimately gangrene or convulsions that prevent voluntary movement. Affected individuals cannot perform the sustained, directed, locomotive dancing described in detail by contemporary physicians, civic officials, and religious authorities who observed the Strasbourg episode at close range. The symptom profile described in the primary sources is inconsistent with ergotamine toxicity in every clinical detail. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the dancing plague of 1518, when an entire town danced themselves to death. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. John Waller's A Time to Dance, A Time to Die 2008 remains the definitive scholarly account of the 1518 Strasbourg dancing plague, and is the standard reference for the mass psychogenic illness explanation. Modern medicine has documented dozens of structurally similar mass psychogenic illness episodes, confirming the mechanism Waller identified as the most plausible explanation. The ergot theory remains popular in general audience accounts, despite being mechanically inconsistent with the recorded symptoms. No dancing plague of comparable scale has occurred since 1518. The Strasbourg episode stands as the most extensively documented and largest mass psychogenic illness event in European historical records, and Waller's analysis of its social preconditions remains the most rigorous examination of the case. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the dancing plague of 1518, when an entire town danced themselves to death, from the historical record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Dancing Plague 1518 ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.